They didn't hire me, not because I lacked talent, but because they couldn't see past my skin. What they didn't know was who I really was.
They thought they were just rejecting another job applicant. But what they didn't know was that the man they turned away would soon change their entire company's destiny. This isn't just a story about a job interview. It's about how hidden truths can shatter prejudice. Stick with me till the end because the twist in this story is going to leave you speechless. And hey, if powerful true stories inspire you, make sure to subscribe and share, because this one is unforgettable. Terrence Brooks had always believed that hard work could break down any barrier. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood, he grew up with a strong sense of discipline. Inspired by his mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, Terrence excelled in academics, and while his friends spent evenings outside on the basketball courts, he often stayed late in the library, studying business, leadership, and innovation. By the time he graduated, Terrence wasn't just another job seeker. He had a resume that could impress any recruiter. Top of his class, multiple internships, and a reputation for solving problems others gave up on. But Terrence wasn't chasing any ordinary career. He wanted to be part of a company where he could bring ideas that actually made a difference. So, when he applied to one of the most prestigious firms in the city, he knew the competition would be fierce. Still, he walked into that office with quiet confidence, wearing his best suit and carrying a portfolio filled with achievements that spoke louder than any introduction could. Inside the waiting room, surrounded by other applicants, Terrence noticed something. Some glanced at him and quickly looked away, while others whispered quietly among themselves. He ignored it. For Terrence, what mattered was his performance in the interview, not the murmurs of strangers. What Terrence didn't know, however, was that the people on the other side of that office door had already begun to judge him, not for his skills, not for his talent, but for something far more shallow. And that judgment was about to change the course of his interview and his life. When Terrence's name was finally called, he entered the interview room with a firm handshake and a professional smile. 3 people sat across the polished table, 2 men in tailored suits and a woman with a clipboard in hand. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for coming," one of the interviewers said, his tone polite but noticeably cold. Terrence nodded, took his seat, and began answering questions with confidence. He spoke about his previous internships, how he had turned struggling projects into success stories, and his vision for helping companies innovate in changing markets. His words carried both clarity and passion, but something was off. Each time, Terrence gave a thoughtful answer. The interviewers exchanged quick, skeptical glances. One leaned back with folded arms, another scribbled notes without even looking up. Then came the first sting. "Impressive background," the senior interviewer said, tilting his head. "But we're looking for someone who can fit seamlessly with our company culture. Do you think you'd be the right fit here?" The tone wasn't about qualifications, it was about something else. Terrence kept his composure, replying calmly, "I believe diverse perspectives strengthen any workplace. I bring not only my skills, but also resilience and adaptability. I'm confident I'd fit in." The woman interviewer raised an eyebrow and smirked ever so slightly. "Interesting. But sometimes clients prefer a certain type of representation. It's about comfort, you understand?" It wasn't said outright, but Terrence understood perfectly. This wasn't about his skills. It was about the color of his skin. The questions grew sharper, more dismissive. His achievements were brushed aside. His leadership experience was downplayed. One interviewer even asked, "Are you sure these accomplishments are all your work?" For the first time in years, Terrence felt the weight of being underestimated, not because of ability but because of prejudice. Still, he kept his tone steady, refusing to let them see his frustration. By the end, he walked out of that office knowing the truth. The decision had already been made before he had even spoken a single word. A week later, the email arrived. "Dear Mr. Brooks, thank you for your application. Unfortunately, we've decided to move forward with other candidates." Terrence read the words slowly, though he already knew what they meant. He had felt the rejection the moment he left the interview room. Still, seeing it in writing hit harder than he expected. But what truly stung wasn't the rejection. It was the thought of why. He replayed the questions, the smirks, the condescending tone. They hadn't rejected his skills. They had rejected him. Meanwhile, inside that company's sleek glass building, the hiring panel discussed their choice. He's talented, yes, one admitted, but maybe not the right image for us. Another added, our clients expect a certain presentation. We can't take risks here. And so they moved on, confident they had made the safe choice. But fate wasn't finished with them. 2 weeks later, the company faced a crisis. A major client had pulled out of a multi-million-dollar deal, citing the company's lack of innovation. Projects were stalling, deadlines were being missed, and the board of directors demanded answers. Ironically, the very problems Terrence had spoken about in his interview, the issues he had solutions for, were the ones now threatening to sink the company's reputation. One afternoon, as executives scrambled in the conference room, a younger manager spoke up hesitantly. There's someone who might help us. I recently attended a leadership seminar, and the keynote speaker addressed these exact challenges. His strategies were brilliant, practical, and unlike anything we've tried. The executives leaned in, curious. And who is this speaker? The director asked. The manager pulled out a flyer from his briefcase. On it was a picture of the very man they had turned away, Terrence Brooks. A heavy silence filled the room. Recognition spread across the faces of those who had rejected him. The man they dismissed as not the right fit was being celebrated elsewhere as a voice of innovation, and at that moment, the first seed of regret was planted. The boardroom buzzed with nervous energy. Executives leaned forward, staring at the flyer like it was some kind of bad omen. That's him, the younger manager said firmly. Terrence Brooks, the speaker who broke down exactly how to avoid the kind of collapse we're in right now. The hiring panel shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They remembered the interview all too well, the dismissive questions, the smug smiles, the rejection they thought no one would notice. Now, that same man was being praised outside their walls as the very expert they desperately needed. One of the senior executives muttered, "We turned him away." His voice was almost a whisper, but it carried across the room like thunder. The director tapped his pen against the table, eyes narrowing. So let me get this straight. We had a solution, sitting in this very building, and we chose to let him walk out the door? No one answered. The silence was louder than any excuse. Meanwhile, Terrence Brooks had no idea that the same people who dismissed him were now sitting in regret. He was busy, traveling between conferences, sharing his ideas with organizations that actually valued him. His name was growing in professional circles, his reputation rising higher each week. But inside that company, panic spread. Projects were crumbling, clients were furious, and the board wanted action. And now the only name on everyone's lips was the one they had crossed off their candidate list. Finally, the director slammed his hand on the table. Get him. Whatever it takes. Bring him back. The same panel that once thought Terrence was not the right fit was about to chase after him, desperate for the very brilliance they had rejected. But what they didn't know was that Terrence was no longer the same job applicant who had walked through their doors. He had grown, and this time, he would be the one setting the terms. When Terrence finally walked back into that office, it wasn't as an applicant. It was as something far more powerful. 2 months after the rejection email, Terrence Brooks found himself walking through the same towering glass doors of the company that once dismissed him. But this time, things were different. He wasn't holding a resume or waiting nervously in a lobby full of applicants. He was stepping in as a guest speaker, personally invited by the company's board to consult on the crisis threatening their survival. The receptionist's eyes widened as she recognized him. The same man she had once watched leave disappointed was now greeted with handshakes and hurried respect. "Mr. Brooks, the board is waiting for you," she said almost nervously. Inside the conference room, the atmosphere was tense. The same executives who had smirked during his interview now rose from their seats the moment he entered. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for coming," the director said, his tone carefully humble. Terrence looked around the room, locking eyes with the panel that had judged him. He remembered every glance, every dismissive tone. But instead of bitterness, he carried himself with quiet authority. He wasn't here for revenge. He was here to prove that talent couldn't be ignored forever. He began his presentation. With calm precision, Terrence outlined strategies to regain lost clients, restructure failing projects, and rebuild the company's reputation. He spoke about leadership that valued diversity, about innovation that required breaking old patterns, about seeing talent where others only saw labels. Every word hit like a hammer, breaking down the arrogance that had once filled the room. The very people who doubted him now scrambled to take notes. Heads nodded. Murmurs of agreement filled the air. The board members who once rejected him now leaned forward, eager for every sentence. Finally, when he finished, the room erupted into applause. The director stood. "Mr. Brooks, your vision is exactly what we need. We'd like to offer you a position, this time at an executive level. Name your terms." The irony was heavy. The man they once said was not the right fit was now being begged to lead them. Terrence paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make his point. Then he said firmly, "I'm not here to fit into a culture that rejects people before hearing their voices. If I join, it will be on one condition. This company must rebuild itself on principles of fairness, respect, and inclusion. Otherwise, I walk." The boardroom fell quiet. Some looked ashamed, others thoughtful. But one by one they nodded. They had no choice. Terrence had the solutions they needed, and more importantly, the leadership they lacked. Within weeks, his influence began to reshape the company. Employees who once felt overlooked now found opportunities. New ideas flowed in. Clients returned, impressed not just by innovation but by the new values the company represented. And as for Terrence Brooks, he wasn't just an employee anymore. He became the symbol of change, the proof that talent couldn't be suppressed by prejudice forever. The same doors that once shut him out now opened wider than ever, because this time, he wasn't just walking in. He was leading. Success isn't just about skills. It's about the courage to stand tall even when others try to shrink you. Terrence Brooks' story is proof that rejection doesn't define you. Perseverance does. The very people who underestimated him ended up relying on his leadership. Why? Because real value can't be hidden forever. The lesson here is bigger than one man's journey. It's about all of us. Every time we judge someone by appearances, we risk losing the very brilliance that could change our future. Prejudice blinds us, but openness creates opportunities, not just for individuals, but for entire communities and organizations. Think about it. How many Terrence Brooks exist in the world right now? How many people are being ignored, doubted, or rejected, not because they lack talent, but because someone refuses to look past their own bias? This isn't just a corporate problem. It happens in schools, neighborhoods, even friendships. And every time it happens, the world loses something valuable. Terrence's story reminds us of a universal truth. Dignity and respect aren't privileges, they're rights. And when we honor those rights, we all rise together. The companies thrive, communities grow, and people discover their true potential. So the next time you're in a position to judge someone, whether as a teacher, a boss, or even a stranger, ask yourself, am I seeing who this person truly is, or am I letting stereotypes make the decision for me? Because the answer could mean the difference between missing out or witnessing greatness. And to you, the listener, remember this. Your worth isn't decided by those who fail to see it. Your rejection today could be the very stage that sets up your breakthrough tomorrow. Stay resilient, stay true, and let the world catch up to your value. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone who needs the reminder that rejection is not the end. It's just a detour toward something bigger. And if you want more powerful stories that inspire, don't forget to subscribe. Every share, every like, and every comment helps bring more lessons like this to people who need them most. Because stories like Terrence Brooks aren't just stories. They're reminders of what's possible when we refuse to give up. And when we finally see people for who they truly are,